Hello friends. Okay, I adjusted my mic setting so hopefully it doesn't cut out. We'll find out. Ideally it doesn't though. It is time for the January Q&A. I'm really excited to mow through these, and honestly these questions are super easy to answer, but just because they're easy to answer doesn't make them any less valuable to know. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. I have a specific order that I'm going to answer these, and all of these questions will be time-stamped on the video, so you can click and see which one you want to look at. But we're just going to go down the order that I have so that I can answer them most efficiently for me, so that this video is nice and short. So, first question, sub DB, that was from Chris. Chris asked, I'm curious to know what dB do you, I think you is intended there, keep your sub at in the mastering stage. I often find my sub is either too loud or too quiet at times. What is the minimum/maximum loudness you keep it at? Such a good question. I go over this in my mastering video. That's quite old now though. I'm going to update it. I was going to try to do so this month, but I'm planning the curriculum a little bit more thoroughly, especially because I want to involve some mixing in this video. So until then, I will give you an answer right now, which I'm going to go into Ableton and show you a project that that I'm working on at the moment. This is a demo that I sent to 4B. That's going to be a collab, but this is all my work so far. So I'm going to play this track. And you're going to hear the sub, and then I'm going to show you how I monitor that sub's level, all right? So. All right, so how do I keep track of the sub level here? Well, first of all, I use the same sub every time, which is my maximal sub, either the clean or the 808 mod version of that sample. You can search that sample. It's also in the template. So that is the sample that I'm using on my sub. The reason why is just because it is incredibly clean. It sounds insane live. It just works extremely well, and I know how to work with it. So now with these samples, here's what I'm looking for, okay? I'm going to go up to my sub master. Now, the part that I have to disclaim is that I have my whole mastering chain prior, and it ends with a clipper, okay? If it does not end with a clipper, for example, you see how my shit is clipping right there? You are not going to get an accurate representation of this level that I'm about to show you. You need to have the clipper activated so you get an accurate representation, okay? If your clipper is not activated, your clipper maximizer, limiter, whatever you prefer to use, if that's not activated, then none of your readings on this post master chain analyzer are going to be accurate. All right, this is my basic, what do I call this? Basic master monitor? Easy master monitor rack. And in it, I have two tools. I have spectrum and I have the loudness analyzer. The loudness analyzer is not necessary to answer this question. What is necessary is spectrum, all right? This process for me is extremely straightforward. The minimum for me to get my sub is above this -6 line right here. So watch. You can see that sub is above that -6 line, all right? And I'm looking at that root sub frequency. That is all that I'm looking at. When it is playing in the mix, the sub level is above that -6 line. That's what I'm looking for. You can see that in the first drop as well. Now, if I even turn off the drums, it's the same thing, all right? You can see that guy is poking well over that -6 line. The minimum that I get it at is just a little bit over. I try to get it a little bit further, sometimes in the middle like this, sometimes even up higher. It depends on what the mix down allows. That's contingent on a whole bunch of different factors. But that -6 line right there, that is the minimum that I strive for, and that is how exactly I monitor it. I watch it after it goes through my master chain, which includes a clipper, limiter, maximizer, whatever you want to use. After that process, that's where I watch it. That's how I do it. All right. So that is the sub-decibel question. Thank you, Chris. That is a fantastic question. All right, secondly, transitions. We had two people ask this. AD, you asked this, as well as Stefan. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I feel really bad if I am not. Oh, we have even more comments. I gotta go up and check. Oh, just two more. Okay. Transitions. All about how you can be creative or go crazy, as well as what's your workflow on jumping from one track section to another arrangement-wise. All right. So that question kind of goes in tandem with what AD asked, which is how do you approach creating transitions for getting out of drops, okay? So let's answer that directly first. Getting out of drops, as each day passes, I'm getting more and more lazy with trying to transition out of drops. At this point in time, I do two things predominantly. And I can show you that right here. So first of all, I let it go from the drop into the next section. And then from there, I decide how necessary transitional elements are. So for example, in this section right here, I have some transitional elements in the build that are just there. You can hear those. It's just like a little beginning before the transitions really start firing up in the build, okay? So because of that, if I turn that off, I barely have, there's nothing actually. There's quite literally nothing in the drop that is a transitional element. I cut the drums out in those last couple beats, that's about it. But that's literally it. You can hear that there's no transitional elements. So this is like, it's literally like two things. It's a cashmere sweep, and then one of my FX risers has like an early tail. So I just used that and kept that in this section of the drop. And that is it. And it's completely sufficient. Okay, so we minimize the drum use here a little bit. Cutting out the high percussion does that job quite well. And then we have some transitional pieces up here in the build. That's it. The other trick that I use is very, very simple. I have this SHM Rise FX. I probably shouldn't give it because it's not mine, but if you go through some of my projects, I am certain that it is there, okay? And this Rise FX does a really, really good job of just standing out. And then I use a little reverb flush. So what I do is I resample some of the sounds from right here. So I believe it's this sound. It's just the last synth hit of the drop before it cuts. So I resample that, stick a reverb on it, throw it to 100%, a little bit of OTT. You get that cool little reverb flush, okay? Now this SHM Rise, this is just a transitional riser. Now let's listen to both, okay? Completely sufficient, more than enough. Now what's the last key to this right here? I use kick FX a lot. After coming out of a drop into like a breakdown, I'm throwing kick FX. It's right here. That guy right there, just big boom. Easily makes a statement of the drop is done, we're chilling now. In this section I have a little filter, not completely necessary, but I felt like it was appropriate because I had done 2 drops straight, so needed a little bit more of a down moment. So with this off, it would sound a bit more abrupt. Like I said, though, it's not completely necessary. I just felt it was appropriate. So that's about it. That is literally the extent that I do my transitions. I don't really use any I don't put like reverb on any groups or anything like that. That's excessive. Sometimes I'll use bass clef washout, but half the time I think it's more of a pain to get it to fit than it is an asset. It just doesn't always like sit right. So I'm pretty much just using like a resample reverb flush, the SHM Rise, and then maybe like one other transition that usually just like sits up in the build because I use it somewhere else as well, right? This is originally from the intro. So that's it. That's all I'm using. Let's see, Stefan, you were a little bit more specific here. All about how you can be creative or go crazy, as well as what's your workflow on jumping from one track section to another arrangement-wise. Yes. Okay, so jumping from one section to another arrangement-wise, it's a little bit more in depth. I'm not quite certain how to answer that, just because it's like, it's a little bit more of like, it's a question that doesn't have like a specific science. I try to do like a switch up every 8 bars. That's mostly how I operate. So for example, here I have a high 808. And then in this section, this is where the drums come in and the 808 drops low. So that's the transition. Also, there's this vocal. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's just a little bit difficult to answer that one. If I think of anything while I'm going, I'll come back to that. But I think the drop transitions, if you can master drop transitions in and out, you should be able to handle any other transitions. Oh, I will say this. Cymbal transitions are practically magic. There's nothing that they can't do. So if you're, when in doubt, use a cashmere cymbal transition and it will sound really, really good. Especially for less active parts. For example, if you have like a bunch of pads and vocals like in your intro, using the cymbal transitions to go from one section to the next, it's the easiest way to do it, and it's super effective. I'm all about effectiveness. It sounds fine. It's easy to do. Do that. That's what I would say. All right, what's next? Sub rhythm, great question. Very, very, very great question. I used to do volume automation on my subs. Nowadays, because of the way maximal sub works, quite literally, I'm just drawing the note length that feels appropriate. So if I unfreeze this real quick. You can hear right there the exact sub pattern. I don't have any volume automation on or anything like that. It's just the length of the note. And I base the length of the note based off of a little bit longer than the duration of the synth. Okay, so I match the sub perfectly to the synths that are playing. The basses, whatever they are, if there's like a long mid bass, then it's going to match that. If there's like a little chuggy, like womp, 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 then my sub is also going to go womp, 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 just with drawn notes. Okay, so here we have wamp, 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 wamp. So that's what the sub is doing. It's the exact same thing. You can see that the note is a little bit shorter than a full length whole note though. That just gives a little tiny bit of downtime in between notes so that it feels a bit more punchy. For example, if I were to drag these out, it just sounds a bit too, sounds a bit weird. Listen. It doesn't have that same bounce to it. Likewise, if I pull it back too far, it sounds a bit empty, right? So it's finding that balance. So my rule of thumb is usually having the sub just be a bit less long than the note that it's supposed to be following. And that's all I do. I'm hardly ever doing volume automation anymore unless I have like a flutter being like, you know, like an auto pan sort of sound, where it's like, you know, like this, that offset. In which case I will use the auto pan or the volume automation flutter on the sub as well as the synth, again, so that it perfectly matches. But that's the only instance where I'm using that. I'm not using that or volume automation in any other circumstance. It's just drawing the notes and experimenting with the lengths to make sure that you get them right. Over time, with practice, you'll get better at it, and it'll become very instinctive how long to make the notes. It's not super complicated. It just takes a little bit of practice. So, great question. Beams, lasers, and sustains. I had a couple people ask that. Peter, you asked that. And then Sam Williams, you asked that as well. You had asked for bass one shots and sustained sound design tutorials, so I'll touch on yours a little bit more. But sustains and the lasers kind of go a little bit together. Oops, shit, I don't need that right now. So let's look at, for example, some of the ones that I did here. Ivory has a really, really good sustained sample. I very often frequent this, and what I will do is exactly what I did here. So let's listen to this. Let's listen to this sample real quick. So that's the sample. It is Ivory bass sustainer demo D sharp. That's from his one pack. It's fantastic. His first pack. It's on his website, so I'd recommend grabbing that. But I basically just fuck with that in order to get a really strong sustain by putting on like a ring mod. And I just adjust that till it fits in really well with the mix. And then I do a hard stereo so that this really hugs the sides of the ears. Again, we want elements that are not focal most of the time to be stereoized, because that puts them out of the focus, of course, so that they're there and we hear them and we experience them psychologically, but we're not fixated on them. I want people to focus on this sound. And if this is too centered, they're not going to focus on this sound. They're going to focus on this sustain. I don't want that, so we go stereo. And that's it for that one. However, for the second half of the drop, I wanted it to sort of release the tension a little bit. So I made my own. And here's what I did for this spooky sustainer. It's simply a chord. Oops. So I'll unfreeze and go into this real quick. So we have Serum. It's a saw wave. We got some detune on it, a bit of a filter so that it's a bit more in the background, right? A little bit more nerfed, not quite as aggressive with the highs. Listen to the difference. A little bit more low-key, a little bit more like lo-fi sounding. Again, hard stereo here. We have a reverb on it. It's at 100% because I really just wanted that dull feeling sound. Here's the difference. Feels very dull, very distant, very far away, not a focus, okay? If you don't want that, then you would get rid of this reverb, okay? And then lastly, I have chorus ensemble to just give a little bit of extra texture to it. Not doing too much, and the vibrato is doing a lot here. Vibrato can really, really make these sustains. There's a lot of vibrato on this sample, this ivory sample, as it is. Adding the vibrato here is what makes it do the effect that I needed to, and not being too stand out on its own as an element. So that's what I do for that sort of sustain. Now I'm going to show you a way that you can make them in Serum pretty easily, and this kind of answers Sam's question as well, for sustains at least. Alright, so here's what I'm going to do. There's a couple ways to do this, but we're just going to start with the main one right here. I'm going to go down to my bass note and just push this octave up a little bit. Goes nice and high again. Take LFO1, put it on the CRS. Turn off BPM, because we don't want it to play BPM, we want to play a frequency. And we're just going to turn this up pretty high. And you can already hear how crazy that sounds. Adjust the shape. You get some crazy shit. Put on a filter. Let's try like a flange plus, turn it down. You can hear the potential for how this can get very, very crazy very quickly. Hit your crazy ass Serum compression with the multiband, and then we could use like a soft clip. And you can hear how that just gets very, very wild very quickly. Do some dimension expander here. Just a little bit more. Now from there's all sorts of shit that we can do, especially with Frequency Shifter. Frequency Shifter is the godsend for sustains. I don't know that I've made any sustains without Frequency Shifter, ever, because just the regular shift or the ring mod are super, super effective. You just hear how crazy that sounds, right? Low ring mods for that sort of like a cutty effect. And then higher ring mods if you just want to completely change the frequency, but in a very, very drastic way. So that's all nuts. It sounds a little bit grungy. And you can fix that with something like Make Less Shitty. So there you go. You can get some pretty crazy sustains that way. You can also hit an FM from B, or from A rather. Turn this off. Get some pretty crazy shit this way. Etc. So it's kind of just like fucking around with that sort of thing, but using those techniques, you can usually get something crazy. And that's it. I don't really make sustains all too often. They're like, it's almost like so easy to make that like I don't really spend that much time like making it. Another way you could do it, like if you have a sample, for example, I did like a whistle sound over here. I can show you that. This whistle sound is so basic. So I'll unfreeze this. Pretty crazy sustain sound. Sustain sound. What is it? It's quite literally just this whistle sample, which is this, but it's stretched out, okay? So this sample, nope, don't want to do that. Down here. All right, and I believe I stretched out this part using the tones. Volume, tones. Okay, so got that nice tone right there. And then, like I said, frequency shifter. Throw that bitch on. Did I change anything up here? No. It's a little bit odd. Oh, because the ring mod was down way too low. So you can just hear how fucking insane that sounds right off the rip. Throw on OTT. Let's see, where is it? T. 16. It's fucking nuts, right? So easy to do. Insanely easy. So just get a long, high-pitched sustained sound. You could even do it with like a string. Here, watch. There's our string. Yoke it up a little bit right here. Get a camel crusher on this guy. It's nuts, right? Look how easy that is to do. It's insane. Get a little bit of... etc. Make sure you get rid of your lows. That'll cause a whole lot of unnecessary sound. And that's what I got for sustains. And Sam, I'm going to demonstrate for you how I might go about doing like a cool bass patch. Let me freeze these guys up real quick though. Boom, boom. This 4B is going to try to get in this exact project. I probably should have thought about that, but fuck it, we'll be cool. And yeah, Sam, you'd said the more bass one-shots and sustain sound design tutorials, the better. So let's do a bass one-shot. I go about my bass one-shots in a very particular way. I like to use distortion methods to get a very specific sound, and I will show you exactly what I do for all of my sound design. Okay, so let's go into Insert MIDI. Hit a serum. And I like to set the octave down to 3. So that when you're playing a regular note, you can tell it's a bass sound. Do the same thing with the sub. Down to there. Cool. All right, now I'm going to find an interesting wavetable. Let's just do like one of these. Cool. The rhythm shape, which is one that it's commonly used, but I designed this shape. It's very simple. Just do this, literally, and then make the curves go like that, right? And then drag LFO1. We're going to drag LFO1 onto the wavetable position, like so. And then I'm going to adjust this to kind of accommodate the sound. And then let's get an FM from B going. So let's just get something random over here like this. Turn that shit down. FM from B. Now the key here, the reason why this is going to make a certain sound is because we have a difference of 3 octaves between these two. That's why the FM from B is going to sound nuts. All right, so that sounds interesting so far, to say the least. It's a little bit grungy and wonky. But it doesn't really matter at this exact moment because we're going to do some other shit. Let's put this LFO on the level as well. Turn it up to 1/8. Going a little bit of a more chompy sound. And now this is where the magic's going to happen. Let's go compressor, distortion, okay, multiband, turn up the threshold. And then let's do something like stomp box. I either use tube, soft clip, or stomp box. Turn up the drive. Now you get that sort of bass sustain sound by not putting the LFO1 on the sub. But if I put it on the sub, they move in tandem. Turn that threshold down a little bit. Let's get our hyper dimension over here. Turn down the detune. That's going to fuck everything up. Turn up the mix, down the size. Let's go like 75% is usually chill. Okay, sounds decent so far. Definitely has a little bit of ways that we can take it. What's next? We could do an EQ. This will sort of give the talking effect. So I'm going to poke a little EQ guy right there and one right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to automate this frequency up and then this frequency down. We're going to get a chomp. Listen. Can adjust it. Not bad. Another thing we can do here, you'll notice that as you're playing the sound, it's going to sound different every time. That's because the phase is set to random. Turn that shit off. You can also adjust the phase to be exactly where you want it to create the tone you want. Goes for both oscillators as well. That's pretty cool. That's what I like to hear. And then filter. So we got some options here. We can use an all pass like this. Oh, shit. Turn down the cutoff, up the resonance. We get that sort of airy sound. If we want to add a little bit of a womp, we can even automate it with the LFO. Cool. Sounds fine. We could do a comb. For like that really sort of weird sound. We might need to, if we're going to use that, we might need to put an OTT on in post, like so. Might be necessary, but we're not going to do this for this sound. We could do like a flange like this, flange plus. Tune it however you want. Let's try comb, same thing. Get that crazy metal sound going on. It's nuts, right? It sounds cool. I'm going to go with the all pass for this sound just because. Turn this like that. Just a little bit, nothing crazy. Okay, and now I'm going to show you something else that you can do over here. So this filter comes in before all this other shit. So this is where we can do some cool stuff as well. So for example, I can go to flanges and go down here, turn on a flange minus, set the cutoff real nice and low, turn up the resonance. Get some cool effects that way. Same thing with flange plus. Do a comb. so on and so forth. It just all keeps going. You can turn on noise, automate the noise with the level. Don't turn it up too high or it's going to sound overbearing. A little bit of chorus in here, never hurt anybody. Turn up the low pass filter. So yeah, that's like pretty much what I do. I'm just fucking around the entire time, but using all these techniques, you can get a lot of cool shit. But every single sound that I do is going to be using this line of thinking. So on and so forth. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight as to how I do mine. All right, cool. And then obviously you can resample, go the whole 9 yards, etc. From there, it gets crazy. There's just infinite possibilities for doing literal randomness. Okay, what do we have next? We got... Okay, so Peter asked, how do you make the synth that almost sounds like a really distorted sample of someone screaming, like in the drop of your Miss the Rage remix? I believe that you're referring to, I can't remember the Miss the Rage remix exactly if it has the sound, but there's a sample on Serum. Or, fuck, Splice, sorry. If someone's dead. Oh, oh, ah, fuck you. It's this one, okay? So I use this guy, and I'm going to go like this. Pull this transient in a little bit tighter. Also, we're going to set this to complex. We're going to pull this guy out. And maybe tones. You can either do tones, texture, or complex. They just make different sounds. Listen. Okay, so we'll do tones for this one. And then we're just going to go into the clip, transposition, and send this up like 3. You can stick on an auto pan like this, turn it up. Get a little bit of OTT going on in there. And that's the sound. That's what I use in a lot of different tracks just for like a cool effect. Gotten yelled at for it by a handful of labels because they think it's too obnoxious, but I like it, so whatever. So that's the scream sound. What is next? Underground shit sound design. All right, so unfortunately, who asked this one? It was Antihero. I sincerely apologize. As you all know, I'm a man of transparency. I barely made any sounds in underground shit. And regarding the way that the sounds were made, I can give you a little bit of insight, but Invaders did most of the sound design in that one. I was more in charge of, so that track was originally, like, he did like a Marshmello remix. Oh, he remixed my song with Marshmello. And then we turned that into a collab. I was much more in charge of taking the sounds that he had made and rearranging them and creating the writing portion of the track in that manner. I barely did any sound design there because his sound design was really good. That being said, most of it was in audio. I can say that he did a lot of frequency shifting and ring mod on a bunch of like splice samples. There were a lot of virtual riot samples, and I got concerned because, you know, those stand out quite a bit. Let's see. You know, they're very, very noticeable because everybody knows the virtual riot samples, right? So I when I first opened the project, I saw that it said virtual riot, and I was like, oh shit, like what? I didn't hear this. I didn't notice this. The reason why is because he had totally like redid the entire sample by using frequency shifters, OTTs. So I'm going to show you like an example of kind of how he did the sound design on this. So, for example, there's so that's kind of an example of like some shit that he might have done. He might have also frequency shifted, like in this manner, just using the regular. This, I do believe, is one of the things he did with this exact sample. It just sat in the background. It was not super noticeable, but it added quite a bit of value. So that's like as much insight as I can give there. I'd open the project and show you, but quite literally it's going to be the exact same thing that I'm showing you right here. So yeah, transparency, I didn't really make that many sounds in that project. He made most of the sounds. They were really, really, really good, and I arranged them. Okay, what do we have next? That was the last one on my list, but we have a couple more. So, Enkido, you asked, where do you get inspired to write songs, and how do you decide what they will be about? Do you have some days, like you need to finish a song today, but you've got no motivation to do so? And if yes, what do I usually do in such cases? Great question. This is more of a talking point than anything. So yeah, this happens all the fucking time. Honestly, there are very few days. I hate finishing songs, bro. I like to make original ideas, but finishing songs has never been fun for me. So over the course of my 10 years of producing, what's really helped me the most is becoming as procedural as possible with my process, so that I can just kind of get it done. So I'm trying to think of how I can best explain this for you. Where do I get inspired to write songs, and how do I decide what they will be about? Let's tackle that part first. What they're about, like if I'm writing, I usually write about like made up shit that like I think of in my head. That's for like songwriting, but for like producing writing, I write shit based off of like things that I think are cool. So like if I'm playing a video game that I think is really, really cool, I'll take sort of like the influence of the world there, and use that. That can sometimes fuel me creatively. I remember like when I started playing like Apex Legends, that did it quite a bit. Mirror's Edge is one of my favorite games of all time, and that game just has like a very particular way of displaying itself aesthetically as well as sonically. Some of the songs in that game are like super cool. So I would, try to recreate some of the sounds from those, or implement some of the sounds in the soundtrack of that game into a track that I was working on. So I do that pretty frequently. And then to address the second part of your question, again, this is just about like, for example, this morning I had to finish this because I wanted to send it to 4B, and I like to provide as much as possible to my collaborators for them to fuck with. So, I knew that I needed to finish, and the thing with making songs is that honestly, like, once you get the intro down, and once you get to the first drop, right, so you got intro, build, and drop, if it's really that hard for you to finish from there, you're probably overthinking it quite a bit. You're probably doing too much, in my opinion. The best songs, in my honest thoughts, are the ones that sound the most tight and cohesive. And tightness and cohesion usually comes from just like recirculating the same ideas over and over again. So you can see, like in my project, how that looks, right? We have the intro, the build up, and then you go into the first drop. Now the first drop and the second drop are pretty different. But they use a lot of the same sounds. You can look down here. There's really, like, in this first drop, literally there's 3 sounds. Sub, synth, and this fart. Right? That's it. In the second drop, we added some more like dubstep shit in there. But then after we do that drop, right, where did we go? We went straight back into the intro just with like some filter effects on it. A little bit of a different arrangement. Just by like shuffling some parts around. That's it. That's all that I did. And that keeps the song cohesive, and it's really fucking easy to do. So you can practice that by just writing your intro, writing your builds, writing your drops, and then just be like, all right, how can I switch this up a little bit to, continue to be fresh throughout the course of the song, but keep what I already have going, keep that there. And then the last drop, right? Like it's almost identical to the first drop, but I added in one extra sound. The drums are all the exact same, so on and so forth. So that's it. And that's the way that I like to do my tracks. I think they sound better with less. Having two drops that are completely polar opposites, you know, it's different if you're doing like a one melodic drop, one heavy drop sort of thing. But just for if you have like two heavy drops and they're entirely different, in my opinion, just make a different fucking song. Like, take the sounds in your second drop that you're trying to make into this first drop and make a different fucking song. Like, I see so many people just overcomplicate the songwriting process for no reason other than they feel like they have to, but you really don't have to. So practice your intro, practice your build, practice your drop, and then take those elements and try to finish a song from there, because you should be able to do so extremely easily. It should not take you more than 2 hours after you get your first drop done to finish the rest of the song. Dead ass. So practice that. When you get to be very procedural with that, it'll be very easy to finish songs on days that you have no motivation to. Hopefully that helps. All right, we have a couple more. Dylan, my man. Hey, Crank, what LUFS do you master to? I've mastered my tracks to the standard, -14 or -12. Ooh. But my tracks do not sound as loud as other released songs. If you mastered a -4, like you said above, what steps do you take at the end of your master to get it there without peaking or making your track sound like shit? Thank you for all you do. You are so helpful. I appreciate you immensely. Thank you for thanking me. It means a lot that you're getting a considerable amount out of this this Patreon, this program that I'm trying to continue. All right. First things first. Standard -14 to -12. You probably read that online somewhere, and that is relatively valid for music that isn't EDM. Even pop music, though, is getting continuously louder and louder. This is probably something that you read on some forum that may have been from something like 2010, 2011. Songs have gotten so much louder in the past 10 years, and then in the 10 years prior, it's insane. For pop music, you may be looking at, like, I don't know off the top of my head, but maybe like -8, -9 LUFS. But for EDM, -4 is kind of the bare minimum, especially nowadays. In like 2011, you could get away with like -7, -8 if you were making like progressive house or whatever. Not anymore. It's too quiet. And the reason why songs are getting louder and louder is because people are getting better at mix downs. And when people get better at mix downs, you're able to make the song louder. Okay? So, what steps do I take to get towards that? I will touch this much more thoroughly in said mix and master video that I'm working on building the curriculum for. But until that point in time, I can't address it. It's all about the balance between your sub and the rest of your sounds. That is why I have my sub here and everything else in this group. So, oops, this group, sorry, OTT, right here. If I play this, you can hear that there is no sub present whatsoever. There's even a little cutoff, a little roll off right here. Nothing, no sub. That's because this guy is doing all the work. This is a good, really clean sub, okay? When these two elements are working in unison, in tandem, not fighting each other, the sub isn't fighting the synths, the synths are not fighting the sub, they're working together, they're well balanced, that is when you can achieve the best loudness possible, okay? So, with that theory in mind, with that thinking in mind, from there, it really is just a game of turning up the volume, and as you're turning up the volume, whatever elements are distorting, that's what you gotta pay mind to. So, if I play this track right now, you can hear that it sounds really clean. And the way that I'm able to achieve that is by having my sub at the ideal level and my synths at that ideal level. And then the drums are kind of sitting on top. That's why I have a clipper going on right here. These sounds, excuse me, and this sub are feeding into this clipper right here. So they're almost, I'm almost mastering my synths and then mastering everything together after that, if that kind of makes sense. Look at that. You can see right there in the green, that's how it's looking. I have a an MBC pushing some of those mids and highs a little bit further after because the sub was a bit too powerful. But that's very isolated to this track. I don't do that in every track. And then from the into Clipper, you know, we have our drums. They're entirely separate. So let's listen to the drums. Turn them on together. And they're in agreement. Everything is in agreement. It's 100% up to your mix down. But the basis of everything that I do in my mix down comes down to finding the sub level, making sure that's at a good level. Finding the synth level, making sure that there is no low-end collision. Okay, if there's low-end collision, that is the easiest way to have your mix down sound like shit. You can't get it louder. It doesn't work because your sub is fighting low-end elements that are coming from your synths. You can't have it. It's not going to work. Cut your lows. Okay, and then just having a nice master chain here. My master chain is based off of clippers. Limiters make things sound weird, in my opinion. I don't like them. And the clippers are, you know, doing the Lord's work here. And that's like, I can't really explain it too much more thoroughly without going all the way into I'd practically be making my mixing and mastering video right now. So this is kind of an IOU. This is the basis of it. I'm going to touch on this a lot more in my video. Stay tuned for that. At this point, I'm probably not going to get it done by the end of the month because I got surprise bookings for the end of the month, which is going to take away from the time that I could spend writing that curriculum. But this is the general theory of it. Oh, and one last thing. I preach writing your music loud, okay? That's why when you turn on my template, when you jump into my Ableton template, first thing that's here is a G clip. You're going to just produce into the G clip, and you can really push your sounds in here. You know, when they start distorting, when they start sounding like shit, that's when you know, okay, this is too loud, dial it back. If you have a whole bunch of magical sauce going on your track beforehand, that can get disguised. Your mix down is false. It's not telling you the truth as to what is going on with your sounds. So producing loud, producing into G-clip as you're writing your track is the first step, and then from there you can sort of pull things back, and it becomes significantly easier. So hopefully that helps. I definitely need to work on that video for you in particular so that I can give you a more thorough answer. All right, Dream Rider, this is, I believe, the last one. What are some of the most common ways to make a clean mix? Ah, fuck, yep. The sound design, typically in Stearman Wavetable, what are some of the best ways to make sounds like the main bass and Charmander's Headshot? So, I kind of answered this in the section that I did for Sam, for the bass one-shots. But those WOMPS, experiment with that all-pass filter. Go look at exactly what I said to Sam, and then experiment with that all-pass filter. Also, though, I'm going to have a much more specific answer to your question here very, very, very soon, and you're going to be quite happy. It's a surprise, but you're going to be quite happy. Give me like another week, okay? What are some of the most common ways to make a clean mix? Well, this is going in tandem with a lot of the things that Dylan asked, right? It's having the sub level at an appropriate level, having your sounds not, if you have low end going on here that is colliding with your sub, you're going to get fucked. So that's the easiest way to have a shitty sounding mix. Let your sub do the sub work. Let your synths do everything up top, everything north of the sub level. Okay. And then, like I said, the practice that I like doing is, clipping my sub and sounds together, so that these two elements aren't going up into the master before being limited themselves. So clipping these allows the drums to stay entirely separate outside of what is going on here, because these are clipping, they're staying entirely separate, right? So, oh shit, I'm on the G clip again. So the drums sound clean here on their own, the synths sound clean here on their own, and then when you put them together, the sidechain is also doing the Lord's work here. The sidechain is what's really, really helping these stay together. If I turn this off, listen to how shitty it sounds. Actually, it really doesn't even sound that bad. That's how good the master chain is with the LEC. The LEC is doing a lot of good shit. And yeah, that's mostly it. Like the mix the mixing process can be super easy in that regard. Oh, the only other thing that I can say is have your focal elements. Your focal elements need a little bit of stereo. Everything needs a little bit of stereo, otherwise it's going to sound very unnatural. But have your focal elements be less stereo, and then your non-focal elements be more stereo, significantly more stereo. So for example, like the sustain, we got a hard stereo on that bitch. Why? Because it's not the focus. But if it's not the focus, we can have a hard stereo on there, and it really helps separate this element from this element. Okay. Way more on that in the mixing and mastering video. I promise you guys are gonna be fucking thrilled with it. I'm working so hard on building the curriculum. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Is this about an hour? Yeah, an hour. So I'll timestamp this, and hopefully this was sufficient enough for you guys. I'm doing this every month. So if there's other questions that you have or something that you just want more thoroughly elaborated, you know, feel free to ask again, and I'm gonna be doing this every month. But that's it. That's it for me. I hope I did a good enough job for you guys. I really appreciate you guys asking questions and you know, taking time to watch these videos, because I really think that I have a lot of information that I can use to help you guys. But you know, you gotta help me understand how I can best help you. And this is sort of beginning that process. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing to do this more in the future. All right, guys. I am going to go get some lunch. Thank you for watching. Thank you for asking the questions. And I'll see you guys next month on this same style video. Coach out. Peace.